Okay, you are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. What an excellent event to be starting off our 2021. We're very excited to welcome Abby Schneiderman, Adam Seifer, and Gene Newman, who are authors of the book, In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, How to Organize Your Life for When You're Not Around Later. It's an easy to follow guide designed to help readers take control of the many details of our modern life. When we talked about hosting this event, I immediately volunteered to do the AV because at least once a week I say, in case I get hit by a bus. I'm joking, but as the owner of a business and a family member, it shouldn't really be a joke. This book is for just about everyone, and it is a way to feel like we have some control over the current events in our life and around us. Abby, Adam, and Gene have a fantastic presentation to share with all of us, so I'm going to turn it over to them. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. Because they're going to be going through a lot of material, they're not going to be answering any of the questions until the end because it's entirely possible they will have covered what you're going to ask about. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Abby, Adam, and Gene and get up their presentation. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here and look forward to tonight's event where we're going to walk you through our new book, How to Organize, in case you get hit by a bus, How to Organize Your Life Now for When You're Not Around Later. And this is Adam over there, and that's Gene. And we have a great event planned for you. But I thought what we would do is start off by giving a little bit of the story of how this all began and how we got into this business of helping people get their lives organized in this way. And it all sort of started back about 10 years ago when I was planning my wedding. And I was using all of these online services that were out there, like the knot.com and Martha Stewart's websites. And I was on them every single day. I was on their apps and their guides and their calendars and their checklists, and I was really struck by how much these services sort of owned me through this life stage. And out of curiosity, I don't know, somehow my brain went from marriage to death, and I started to think about what's next. What are the other life stages that are out there, and what are the other resources that are out there that are going to guide me through the rest of my life? And I just started looking into it. Adam and I are repeat tech entrepreneurs. And so out of curiosity, I just started researching and found that there were plenty of resources for having weddings, plenty of resources for having kids, plenty of resources for sending your kids off to college, even doing financial planning or retirement planning. But then after retirement planning, the whole area around life stages online just kind of evaporated. And so I mentioned this idea to Adam and said, who's helping people deal with the last life stage? And he said, well, somebody is, because that's the one life stage that everybody has to deal with. Not everybody gets married, not everybody has kids, but everybody has to deal with this, inevitable stage of life. And so we started kind of meeting up in coffee shops and each other's apartments. And after about a year of looking into it, we were frankly shocked and actually quite appalled that there was really nothing. And it just didn't seem fair that the one life stage that everybody has to go through was the one that had nothing modern, out there to help people. And so that was the original idea, was to create the first modern consumer company in what we now call, helping people with what we now call life and legacy planning. And we started by writing articles. And we wrote, this is actually a picture of our team from a few years ago, but we wrote hundreds of articles on everything from how do you write a will, to what do you wear to a funeral, to what does a healthcare proxy do? And Everplans, our company, was the result. And it grew quickly, proving that there was clearly a need for this type of information. And then a big part of our personal story is that about a year after we had put up these articles and started working on this journey, a tragedy occurred in my family, one that would change the trajectory of my family and our company forever. But my 51-year-old brother was killed in a head-on collision by an impaired driver driving down the wrong side of the road. And everything changed for us in this instant. And my family was thrust into this horrible position that many families experience. We were shocked, we were obviously heartbroken, and we were unsure of what to do next. And while my brother had made some financial arrangements, my family had no idea what he would have wanted. And suddenly we had to make all sorts of stressful, expensive decisions in an incredibly short amount of time. And here's actually a picture of us together when I was 2 years old. This is my favorite picture of us. But what this situation really made Adam and I realize was that in order to really make a difference in for people at their time of greatest need, we actually had to help them get a plan in place ahead of time. That way, if a tragedy or emergency struck, families would have easy access to everything that they needed. And so we continued building our planning platform. And that's when Gene Newman came aboard, who's an absolute genius, to help us make this whole topic more relatable and accessible to all. And the book really is a culmination of everything that we've learned and will empower and inspire everyone to get a plan in place. But when we started writing In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, well over a year ago, we obviously didn't know that the world was going to change the way that it has, which we do address in the book's introduction. Adam, if you don't mind reading from that.
Sure. Thanks, Abby. Hi, everyone. And this is a picture of my family, and that's who I plan for. And this picture was back in March. Remember back when wearing a mask was still just a novelty? But let's start with an excerpt from the book. For more than 10 years, we have been obsessed with helping people get their lives organized in case something unexpected happens. By far, the most difficult part of our mission used to be convincing people that the unexpected actually happens, and that unexpected things could happen at any time, like getting hit by a bus, as our not so subtle title suggests. And then at the beginning of 2020, the entire world was hit by a bus in the form of a pandemic. The unexpected, the very thing our company was built around, became reality for just about everyone on the planet. Life as we knew it ground to a halt. Those families that could hunkered down to minimize the impact, and most everyone feared the worst. But there were undeniable bright spots too. A warm text from a friend you lost touch with years ago, a post on social media from someone on the road to recovery, a former coworker checking in to see if you were okay. Group video calls with family members became the norm, a chance at least to see each other's smiling faces and to poke fun at parents who spent half the call trying to figure out how to turn on their cameras and microphones. Birthdays, holidays, and graduations were celebrated remotely, but we could still be together. These were the moments that made us forget how tough everything had become and focus on what's really important, the hope and strength we get from those we love, who themselves take strength from us in return.
The feelings of hope and despair that arise during a crisis can often motivate us to make lasting positive life changes. But as memories fade and normal routines return, that feeling of hope and purpose can diminish. This book is intended to help you renew, reinforce, and remind yourself of that hope for the rest of your life. And we believe that planning for your family and loved ones is the key. Our mission has always been to help as many people as possible prepare for the unexpected. And that mission, to help people ensure that their family isn't left unprepared when the unexpected strikes, has taken on an even greater, more solemn importance now, but really it was always that way for us. Over time, as more and more people started using Everplans, we realized the site wasn't about death. It was about life, because getting everything organized lets you live to the fullest, knowing that you've prepared for anything and having done your very best for those that you love. And that's what you'll find in this book, a plan to do just that. And it's easier than you think. And speaking of loved ones, here's a picture of my kids. in Rehoboth Beach. Here's a good question to consider as you get started. What's important to you? Most people simply say family, but we want you to go deeper than that. What's really important to you? It doesn't have to be one thing. Our lives aren't that simple. It might be something that hurts a little or even makes you uncomfortable to think about, because being challenged can spring us into action. We all have different motivations. Maybe you witnessed the chaos a friend experienced after the death of a family member, and you don't want your own family to suffer the same fate. A parent might be terrified at the prospect of their young children being raised by an unfit guardian or worse, in foster care. Money is often the cause of most issues, and perhaps you don't want your family going to war over what you leave behind. Or maybe it's as simple as you waking up in the middle of the night, completely wrought at a pandemic that went from a story on the news to our new reality. Once you have a clear vision of your purpose, think of it as a picture-in-picture box on a TV screen following you around throughout the entire book. That picture might have an image of your kids, your spouse or partner, your siblings, your puppy, or a person that you loved who is now gone. When you get discouraged or overwhelmed, take a second, visualize that image in your head, and then repeat this mantra. This is why I plan. Now that you know where we're coming from, Gene's going to give the framework in which we help you get your entire life in order without losing your mind.
Thank you very much for that amazing lead-in, reading all that stuff. And what we want to let you know is that the book is broken up into 3 levels, and each builds on the last to help you gather and organize all the stuff that you have, the things that you may want or that you need to get in place, and ways to add personal touches to truly make it yours. Now, every task we cover throughout the entire book has something called a plan of attack. And that's a way to tell you how long it takes you to do one of these projects or these tasks, how long it should take, and how much it costs, if there is any. And most of these things will just cost your time. There's really not much of an expense. There are other elements scattered around, and they're called side missions. And these may or may not apply to your life, like if you have young kids, if you care for aging parents, if you have a small business, or if you have any pets, and so many more scenarios and situations. We also have something called break time sessions between each one of these levels, and they cover things like when you should plan certain milestones in your life, how to have these difficult conversations with family and loved ones without emotions running completely wild, and what are the consequences if you don't do any planning at all. Now, even though the book covers every component of a person's life, it's all broken down into easy to digest pieces so you don't get overwhelmed. Now, we want to give you a brief overview of each of the levels, and just so you know what to expect. And Abby, let's start off with level 1, okay?
Okay, level 1. So here's where we're going to start things off by helping you get the following things in your life under control, which includes a system for managing all your passwords and secret codes, your money and assets organized so that you don't have a panic attack, an instruction manual for your home and vehicles, and a decluttered address book where your most useful contacts rise to the top. I am still working on this one. If there's one thing that we mention in the book repeatedly, it's passwords. It's almost funny how many times we mention them because they've just become such a vital part of our lives in so many ways.
Yeah, so the average internet user has more than 130 accounts, and each of those accounts requires either an email or a username and a password. And so how do most people keep track of them? According to a Pew Research Center study, 65% of people say that they keep them all in their head. Yeah, that's right. Memorization is the dominant method, which means everyone is either a super genius. I can't even remember what I ate for dinner last night, or what they're doing is reusing the same passwords on multiple websites, which we all know at this point is just asking for trouble. And then beyond the password issue, unlike your physical possessions like paintings or bicycles, your digital assets aren't always obvious. They're not lying around the house. And so they can get lost or rendered inaccessible if you don't get them organized. And when we say digital assets, we're talking about hardware and software. And so it includes your phone and computer, as well as things like your iPad, in addition to everything else that's online or in the cloud, like social media, shopping, entertainment, benefits programs, family photos, videos, and so much more. This is referred to as a digital estate plan, and we cover it from multiple angles throughout the book. And I don't want to give away any spoilers and ruin the surprise here, but we start the book with passwords and we end with passwords. As Abby said, they're just that important these days. And then another important aspect that we cover in level 1 is managing your home and your contacts.
Stop for a second and just think about all that goes into running a household. This is one of our favorite illustrations from the book and shows how menacing a house can be if you don't know the ins and outs. But from the mortgage or rent, to the routine maintenance, to the utility bills you pay on a monthly and yearly basis, I don't have to emphasize this point because you already know. A typical household can have more than 15 utilities, vendors, or other services associated with it. And that doesn't even include how it's financed or any quirks that only you know about, like if part of the basement floods after a big storm. But now imagine your family trying to piece all of that together without you around to help. Do they even know where you keep the deed? Do the utilities in your name need to be canceled or transferred to someone else? If a pipe bursts, is there a trusted plumber that you call to get the job done who doesn't rip you off? What about maintenance and care instructions for your car? There are dozens of things that you have figured out over the years to help your home operate smoothly, which is why our book explains how to create something that we call a home operating system, which is a helpful and easy to compile instruction manual for your home. We also provide a system to help you get all the important contacts in your life organized, which can help your family in so many ways, whether it's for something routine during an emergency or for when it's time to settle your estate. You'll realize while reading the book that level 1 is all about what you already have getting in order. And as we move on to level 2, you'll notice we start adding some more elements into the mix.
Correct, because level 2 includes some of the more traditional aspects of estate planning, like legal documents and healthcare directives, as well as a deeper dive into your digital world. And here's what you're going to have accomplished after this level. You're going to know how to get a will and power of attorney in place, as well as knowing how to set up a trust. You're going to know how to organize all your bills and debts into a neat, non-depressing pile. You're going to have composed what we call a personal medical journal, and also learned everything about an advanced healthcare directive. And you'll have brought order to every single digital account you have. Now, this level can seem stressful because it involves things that seem either expensive or complicated or just things you might want to avoid. We demystify all of that and explain that by doing this, you're actually going to be removing stress from your life. Now, Adam has 2 personal examples, one involving a will and another involving medical directives that really brings this all down to earth.
Thanks, Gene. And this is a picture of my father-in-law, Marvin, who was an incredible man, and he's there with my wife, Carrie. And Marvin died unexpectedly about 3 years ago. And even though we figured he didn't have a will, we weren't entirely sure. And so we spent the first couple of days searching all over the place just in case. And then because there was no will, there was no executor. And so my poor wife had to petition the court just to be allowed to become the administrator of his estate, just so that she'd be allowed to do unpleasant things like shutting down credit cards and bank accounts and things like that. And she also had to put up a personal bond to be able to do that. It's already so yucky, and these extra steps made it extra difficult. And it would have been pretty easy to avoid. Getting a will is not nearly as complicated or as expensive as most people think. There are a bunch of free or inexpensive options online, and they cover the basics and can help you make sure that you have something in place. And of course, if you have a more involved estate, like you've got a blended family, or you have property in multiple countries or multiple states, or you have some complicated investments, it's well worth the cost of an estate attorney to get this completed once and for all, if only to save your family from the unnecessary burden later. And now, on the flip side of this, I want to talk a little bit about how planning in advance made all the difference for my mom and my family. This is my mom, Joan, and this is where I get to talk to you about the importance of medical directives and specifically something called an advance directive, which has a bunch of different parts, but is usually the combination of a living will and the naming of a healthcare proxy. And the importance cannot be overstated. And I experienced it with my mom, who unfortunately died near the end of 2019 after a really tough fight with cancer. I was fortunate enough to have taken a little time several months beforehand to sit down together with her and with my dad. And we straightened out her living will and we straightened out her healthcare proxy. And I also did my dad's as a bonus while we were at it. And we got to discuss what was really important to her. And yeah, the conversation was weird at the beginning, but once we got it going, it really just started to flow. And ultimately, when the end came and she wasn't able to communicate anymore, I knew exactly what she wanted. And I knew she wanted to be home. And I knew exactly what she didn't want. And because of that, there were no dramatic arguments with anybody in my family. And I wasn't tortured then or now, wondering if my decisions were the right ones. And that little bit of communication and that little bit of planning really gave us all so much peace, and it gave her control over her end. And there was a study done by Stanford University that found that more than 80% of patients say that they wish to avoid hospitalizations and high intensity care at the end of their lives, and that they would prefer to die at home. But their wishes are often overridden. And look, while there are never any guarantees in life, if you have these medical and legal documents in place, it will definitely increase the likelihood of you getting what you want. And one of the best parts of an advance directive is that it's free. You don't even need an attorney to do it. We actually have a template for each state's advance directive on our website at everplans.com. And we also have a link in the book. So you can go find the templates for your state and get it done.
So we walk you through all of this in the book. I'm hearing an echo. Not sure why.
We're not hearing it on our end, Abby.
You're not?
No, I think it's okay.
Hold on one second. I'll try muting you. Well, we'll try. So we walk you through all of this in the book, along with a quick, easy to understand reasons as to what each of these legal or official documents provide and the decisions that you need to make. Here's a quick overview. Your will. Who gets your assets, and do you need to name guardians for any dependents? Power of attorney. Who should be making financial and legal decisions on your behalf if you can't? Advance directive. Who should be making health decisions on your behalf if you can't? And what sort of treatments do you want? When boiled down, it's really that simple. And you'll find that most of your effort won't be in actually doing the paperwork, but really just in making the decisions. And then trusts. How to protect assets and even what trusts are in the first place, which I still find confusing. Here are some questions for everyone here to think about. Do you have any of these documents in place already? Have you put off creating them? Do you want them, but you're just not sure where to start? One of the goals of the book and Everplans is to make sure that you create the plan that's best for you and your family. So don't hesitate to contact us after this with questions or concerns that might be keeping you from crossing these documents off your to-do list. And this brings us to the final level, which focuses on personalization.
And level 3, it allows you to personalize your plan with a slew of finishing touches, which include an organizational plan for managing all your meaningful photos, recipes, and family heirlooms, a record of your personal history, which includes interests, lessons you want to pass on to others, and your beliefs, so you leave them, people remember you for who you were and who you want to be remembered as. A model for writing letters and recording videos to family and loved ones that they'll cherish for the rest of their lives. A complete understanding of everything that goes into planning a funeral. And you could even write your own obituary if you're up for it.
I want to share something that's not in the final draft of the book, but it is a story that I love, and you can think of it as bonus footage. But I was talking about family traditions over the holidays before COVID. And one of our close family friends who was hosting a brunch at her home took me aside and led me into her living room. And there she showed me something called a miniature chest drink table that her late mother had found antiquing in Canada. And Melanie recalled how her mother had two armchairs next to each other with this chest between them. And after she died, Melanie and her family were packing up the apartment, and they found notes on the back of her favorite things, including this chest, which said, "For Melanie, little table, to Melanie, much love, Mom." Her mom also left her a note on the back of a Salvador Dali lithograph that Melanie bought her in Paris that said, "My only Dali from my only mill." The miniature table and Dali lithograph are beautiful, but obviously these notes make them so much more meaningful. And this is certainly a beautiful way to express love and say goodbye, but it doesn't have to be a surprise. While the miniature chest drink table is now safely in Melanie's possession, what if she had never found the note? Cleaning out a late parent's home while grief-stricken could lead to discarding items that have a story to tell. And the same goes for a family member swooping in and taking everything, especially if they think those items have value. A person who works closely with Everplans told us how one of her in-laws looted all the classic furniture from a deceased parent's house before anyone had a chance to claim anything. And while it was many years ago and she's not even sure she wanted any of it, it's still a minor point of contention among the family. So anything that you can do to prevent possible conflicts in the future is always a benefit, especially if it only requires some paper and tape or a few sticky notes.
And here's the thing I learned working with Abby and Adam for all of these years, and it's been a lot of years. They love and are obsessed with food and especially cooking, so much so that I insisted they each include at least one of their favorite recipes word for word in the book, just so people know how they could start organizing their recipes so they could be enjoyed for generations to come. And now I'd like the master chefs to explain their creations and what recipes mean to them. And Abby, you get to go first.
Thanks, Gene. Well, recipes are extremely important to me, as I'm sure they're important to many people here in attendance. My late beloved babysitter, Lydia, used to make the most incredible empanadas. Every year on Halloween, she would make these empanadas and others for other special occasions. And she shared the recipe with me before she died. And every time that I miss her, I make the empanadas and they bring back these incredible memories. Plus, I get to share them with my kids, which makes it a new memory for them and for us. And I didn't actually include that recipe in the book, but I did something sweeter, which is my mandel bread recipe that was adapted from my grandmother's and my mother's recipe. And you can see me here with my sister showing my daughter how to make it along with my sister. And Adam, I think, went a more savory route.
Yeah, I chose something a little bit spicier. It's my chili recipe that I've been working on for like 25 years, trying to get it perfected. And there's a picture of it in my favorite yellow pot that I got from my grandmother. And I actually heard a rumor that Abby's husband, Ben, made this chili recipe this past weekend.
True story.
And so, but the recipe is great because I've got it in I've totally geeked out on it. I've got it in a spreadsheet, which automatically recalculates the amount of ingredients that you need based on how many people you're cooking for. It shows you replacement options if you can't find certain ingredients, and has little tips along the way, like in the step where you're cutting up chilies, to remind you not to rub your eyes, otherwise you're going to be really sorry. But these type of memories play into a host of other aspects that we include in the book that really help you keep your legacy alive. Think of all the personal lessons and tips and knowledge that you might want to leave behind, whether it's information about your family history, things that you've loved about your life, or lessons that you might want to pass on to future generations. Technically, all those things are called an ethical will, but in the book, we call it Spill Your Life. And we broke it into 6 rounds, so it feels a little bit like a game show. And you know, a lot of this stuff might seem obvious, but when you're answering these questions, you'll realize how many of these questions do you wish you could have asked someone who's no longer around?
And along these same lines, here's something I'm sure we can all agree with, which is helping others. Giving to charity is great, as is devoting your time to a cause. If you've done work to help others, whether it's regularly volunteering for events, being a big brother or sister, manning a phone for a telethon, or giving donations to organizations or institutions that you're proud to support. Perhaps you've even gone a step further and allocated money from your estate to make sure that the money gets to the right place. These details should be clear and direct so that the people that you leave behind know to continue to support these causes in your honor. Which brings us to the final part of the book and the inevitable part of life, the end.
And we weren't kidding when we said that we help you write your own obituary, because we have 3 different templates. We have 4 templates in the book, from small all the way up to extra large. But before we do that, we explain every aspect that goes into planning a funeral, from choosing between burial or cremation, a bunch of methods and ways that you could prepay in advance, or how to put money aside, as well as making sure that you have the exact service and all the elements required so your last party can really be one for the ages.
And this might seem like a sensitive topic, but you can also view it as a practical discussion to have with your family. At my brother's funeral, we probably ended up paying way too much for the casket because we didn't know any better at the time. And when talking about this with my parents, my mom said that her preference was for the plain pine box. And my dad at the time surprised us all by saying that he wanted the most expensive one that we could find, which is good to know, because this is why communication is vital, so that you're not spending too much money when you don't need to, or spending too little in the case of my dad.
Yeah, communication is central to everything that we cover, because sharing this information and your wishes and your plans with others is what makes your whole plan complete. We also know it can be tricky to talk about some of these things with loved ones. Talking with family can be littered with emotional and sometimes suspicious landmines. When topics include money, medical issues, or death, it can be even more terrifying. Consider for a second that people would rather talk about no longer being on Earth than talk about their finances. The Wells Fargo study that's pictured here, and that's also in the book, revealed that although people aren't comfortable talking about money, it's one of the biggest stresses in their lives, and it causes sleepless nights. And so we offer a whole bunch of tips on how to eliminate the fear and stress from these topics, and to break the ice to get your family talking and planning together.
So thank you. This barely scratches the surface of what we cover in the book, and we can't wait for you to start reading it and getting your own plan completed and out of the way. And if you think this book isn't for you, I have one final story. Before I started Everplans with Adam, I was explaining the concept of the company to my parents, and my dad said, "I don't need this. All my legal documents are with our estate attorney." And then my mom interrupted and said, "But wait, Milton, who's our estate attorney?" So you might have a folder with legal documents somewhere, or a file with an attorney, but our lives are made up of so much more. Plus, if no one knows where it is, it's sort of like you never did it in the first place. The first step is getting started. This book helps you do that, and so much more. So thank you for having us. We're here to answer any questions that you may have. If you need help after reading the book, actually taking action, that's what everplans.com has for you. And I think if you go to encasethebook.com, you will, and buy the book, you will get a free year of the Everplan service, which will help you get all of this in order. So thank you again. We're here to answer any questions.
Hello. Should we just talk among ourselves? We can. We're really good at that.
Trying to tell you how nice it was to actually have the book with me while you guys were talking, because it is, just so easy to go through. You know, it's not like it is like a workbook, which I mean, I think is wonderful. So, folks, if you have any questions, take advantage of us having them here. And then I'll stop talking. So I'm assuming you guys have all gone through this book. Whoop. There we go.
Us? Have we gone through the book?
Well, yeah. Well, and there's some questions over. There's a question over here about someone who's got a family member who is not wanting to have these discussions. So I'm gonna let you.
We do have tips in the book for how to start having these conversations with family members. It depends on which way the conversation is flowing. If you're the one trying to give information about your life to someone else, then that's a little bit easier, because you can just say, hey, I have a couple of key things I want to make sure that you know about, just in case, I get hit by a bus. But if you're trying to get this information, maybe from parents or older relatives, we think that there are some good conversation starters that you can use. Talking about what you may have done first might get the conversation going. Saying, at dinner, for example, oh, by the way, I just got life insurance today. Hey, do you have any life insurance that I should know about? But it's those kinds of things, and really just getting the conversation started about what types of things that are maybe even everyday things, like little passwords that you might have that could lock somebody out of something that you want to start talking about with them.
And sometimes you can start small with one little thing, but when you start pulling on the thread, it turns into a much bigger conversation. And so, one of the ways I was able to have the conversation with my parents is it started with a pretty innocuous conversation about something that was important, but my parents were starting to have a little bit of trouble managing all the different medications that my mom was taking. And so we sat down to have a discussion about strategies for getting those organized and for looking through them all together. And then in the course of doing that, I was able to pivot into a conversation about, who should be making decisions for you about things like medical issues, if you're not able to make those decisions, Mom. And then that morphed into doing their advanced directive. And then that morphed into a conversation about where my mom did or did not want to be buried. And then, my dad jumped up, who never wants to talk about things like that, and went running out of the room. And then 5 minutes later, he came back and he had found the deed from like the 1920s that his grandparents had gotten when they bought the family plots at a local cemetery, which none of us had ever known even existed. And he was so psyched to show it to us. And so, just a little bit can sometimes start creating more and more and more momentum, even with people that are a little bit resistant.
And the stealthy talk that they're talking about, it's true. You're gathering information. Think of it as like a little recon mission where you're trying to do this. And we supply anecdotes in the book to get people talking, because sometimes discussing current events, things along those lines, it gets people interested. And it could start with something big. We mentioned a lot of times how it's been 6 years since Prince has died, and his estate is nowhere near being settled because there's millions and millions of dollars at stake. And we're surprised every time we see updates to this. And a lot of times bringing those things up, because they'll say, oh, well, I'd never want that to happen to me. And well, I don't have millions and millions, but I'd want to make sure the house goes to the right place. And you could use these stories that we give you. We mentioned with advanced directives and Terry Schiavo, which people may remember here. There was a big story in the news in the 90s. So things like that really help people open up and just pay attention when they're giving you their answers. Because as Abby said with her parents, finding those things out, it does become part of a conversation that you could return to later. And Abby, wait, did you? Because you said there was an update to that story though when it came to your dad, because he said he wanted the most expensive casket.
Yeah, many years ago, he said he wanted the most expensive casket, and I was bringing that up at these events as we're talking about our book, and I said, Dad, is it okay if I mention that story? And he said, it's totally fine if you mention the story, but I have an update. I don't want the most expensive one anymore. Now I want the cheapest one because your mother doesn't want me spending all that money on my funeral. So, that's fine. Good thing he told us though that he had changed his mind, because I could have easily seen getting into an enormous fight with my mom if something happened to my dad, with her saying, no, we're going to give him the cheapest one. And me saying, no, that's not what he would have wanted. But now I know that is what he wants and he's fine with it. So it's just having those kinds of conversations is key. And we know that those conversations are hard, but we do give some really good tips in the book and on Everplans for how to do it.
And that's probably also a good segue into another question that I see in the list from Sarah about how often do we recommend people reevaluate their plans? And I don't know if there's a specific amount of time. We all firmly agree that this is not a set it and forget it type of experience, because people's lives do change and people's relationships change and people's feelings about things change. Their financial circumstances change. And so in the book, we actually kind of lay out a bunch of things that typically cause people to want to go back and reevaluate their plans. When you get married is when somebody might want to reevaluate their plans, because now all of a sudden there's a new partner in town, right? And then obviously when people have kids, but when people buy their first home is a moment when people reevaluate plans. When you change jobs or you retire, if you inherit a bunch of money or you win the lottery or something like that, is a good moment to reevaluate your plans. And then of course, if you end up having a very serious illness, whether it's a short-term one like COVID, or it's a longer-term one, that's often a good opportunity to reevaluate some of your plans, because the people that you trusted in your 20s, you may not still even be friends with them by the time you're in your 40s or your 50s. And so you should always think of this as a work in progress that you probably want to come back to from time to time to just tidy up.
And Deborah asked how she said she missed the part about how you get a free year of Everplans service. If you go to encasethebook.com and buy the book, and there's instructions there, you will get a free year of Everplans service. And the Everplans service helps you by giving you reminders. It's a secure technology service that helps by prompting you, giving you reminders. It allows you to put this information inside your Everplan. It's really the solution to everything that the book talks about. Somebody asked us that the other night. They said, why are you not telling us about your solution to this? But because we're here to talk about the book, which is which will give you all of the inspiration. But we do have an incredible platform for you to actually take what you've read in the book and take it to the next level.
And I will just add, even if you buy the book at your local bookstore, like One More Page Books, you can still go to encasethebook.com and fill out the form and let us know that, and we'll give you a code that you can use for your free year at Everplans. Let's see, what else is on this list?
There's another one here about should you read it all the way through or just start at the beginning? And we do think that how we laid out the book, and that's what makes the service. We've been trying, again, Abby and Adam have been at this for 10 years. I've been at it for 7. So the concept is, how do we get people interested and intrigued and inspired to do this? And it's different mediums, different methods. In the book, it really does operate in a way where you could start at the beginning and you just read it and you're going to start thinking of things. It's going to start, there's going to be some points that really hit home with you. And you're going to say, yes, this is something that worries me. No one else in the household knows how I run this. If I weren't around, the mortgage would not get paid, or no one would even know how to pay the bills, or no one would know how to take care of any of the doctor's appointments that a child has to go to, or the parents. So all these little things will add up to you. But when you take it apart piece at a time and you do it online, you find your method to do it. Because if you want to start writing it down, if you want to make notes, if you want to just start keeping things, because when you go around your home to start planning that for the home operating system, you're going to want to carry your phone, you're going to make notes, you're going to want to take pictures and document all this stuff. So there's all these different ways, and to recognize that it's not an all or nothing thing. There is definitely going to be parts that you take piece at a time. We don't want you to say, okay, if you're not done in a week, you're a failure. This is an ongoing process. You get the first part out of the way, you start really getting the momentum going, and then from there it does become about maintenance and just keeping it updated so people know what's going on.
Yeah, you don't have to take 3 days off from work to do this whole thing. And so to be specific about your question, even if you just did a couple of the things in the first chapter, I think you'll feel really good about yourself. You'll feel kind of heroic, and you will have produced something that's really valuable for your family. And then you can decide from there if you want to keep going with it.
Here's an interesting one.
Sarah has a question here, which is, how in depth do we get with the complexity of end-of-life medical care and evidence-based interventions? Do you want to answer that, Gene?
Yeah, I mean, we go into all the decisions, as Adam mentioned during the presentation, when it comes to an advanced healthcare directive, naming a healthcare proxy, someone that's going to make sure your wishes get done from your living will, which are the things that you want. And we do have a chart in the book that explains what certain interventions are, whether it's, a lot of people lately have heard about ventilators. So that's something that when we wrote it, people might have been a little iffy about. Now I'm sure most people from the news know exactly what a ventilator does, what dialysis does, what antibiotics do, what CPR does. So we really go through and give a list of that, because when you're making these decisions, you do want to make sure that it's something, and we suggest speaking with a doctor if you're confused or if you don't know, and it's completely understandable. And for almost everything, this leads to something, and Adam might want to speak to it, about like when it does come to talking with professionals, and don't feel like you have to do this on your own and do that, because we're big proponents of that. Adam, if you'd like to speak.
We're not, and just so you know, we're not doctors, we're not healthcare professionals, we're not financial planners, we're not estate attorneys. We're experts in how to get your life organized for when you're not around later. And these are all topics that we do cover. But again, we always say that you should, for specific help on any topic that you're going deep on, you should always consult with either your healthcare provider or financial planner, attorney, et cetera.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ed. But yeah, we get so many questions like that, but we also realize that just taking those steps, it really shouldn't be as complicated and detailed. And as Abby mentioned earlier, it's about the decisions you have to make. That's where you do most of your work. So you're not going to, when it comes to buying insurance, for example, life insurance, you want to know, okay, we arm you with the things you walk in and know what to ask and what questions to do, so it can cut down on the time. So you're aware with a will, you have young kids or other dependents, who would you want taking care of them, where your assets going to go, and who should take care of everything. Now, having that information, then when you sit down to create this with a professional, or if you do it with an online service, you're going to be much further ahead of the game than if you just try to go in there blind. But we suggest getting something in place, because no matter what age you are, there's always a possibility that you're going to need it.
And you don't have to, someone said, do you have to, how much of this can you do at home? You can do all of it at home if you like. Basically, I think you can do all of it at home. Today, there's a lot of online services that are out there that you can use, whether it's to create a will or to do a healthcare directive or name a power of attorney. You don't have to do anything complex. And you can just, as Adam and Gene have been saying, you can just take 5 minutes and do a few quick things that will, I promise you, help you sleep better at night and be a huge gift to your family. And those things you can do literally right now, wherever you are. And so the book really helps you think through everything from your 5-minute plan to your, 5-year plan and it's never ending, because as somebody else asked, things are always changing. So the idea here is to get into the mentality that you just want to make sure, what are those things that are in your life, in your head, or in your world, that if something were to happen to you would cause a huge mess for your family. And we're kind of trying to get you into that mode more than anything else.
Then Deborah had a good question. Do you discuss pros and cons of having family members versus outsiders serve as executors? Adam, all yours.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit, and look, there's some big upsides to not saddling somebody in your family with the burden of being an executor. It's you know it's a pain, no matter how well organized somebody is. And so if you feel like you can afford an attorney to be an outside executor, and you have one that you can trust, that may be a wonderful gift to leave to your family. But the flip side of that is that an outside executor is not going to know a lot of the nuances and idiosyncrasies of your family, and so they may not be in the best position to make judgment calls on the stickier issues. And so you're really the best judge of whether or not there are going to be sticky issues like that would be best in the hands of a family member than an outside attorney. But it's definitely possible to hire someone to be an executor if you don't feel good about leaving that with someone in your family.
And we mentioned in the book, the same way we mentioned passwords multiple times, we mentioned that even the most able, brilliant people, you almost always end up hiring an attorney when it comes to probate, because when these things, when you're dealing with it, there's the personal aspect, but it's time consuming. There's a lot of ins and outs, and you're going to probably want some assistance. So even for simple estates, having someone that's going to guide you through that, and then a person to work with the attorney to make sure, again, families, we talk about the logistics of planning, but family dynamics can be very strange. Maybe you're going to say, okay, this person might want to contest it. This person is going to be very difficult in this situation. And having someone there that can kind of referee and guide them through is great. But when it comes to the legal things, if there are filing motions, if there are a lot of things that you're just completely confused about, you can't stop your life to do this, and it does still have to get done. So make sure that you do take those steps, and someone doesn't feel like they're going to do it all on their own, because again, an executor making a mistake, they could be held liable for that. They could, they're handling a lot of assets, they're dealing with a lot of these issues. So dealing with it, talking with an attorney and making sure that it's done properly is always the best way. And the same with any of the legal documents, because we want you to have something. Everyone should have something. But you also don't want to find out that if they go to file a will and then the court says, they have to, what's this? This doesn't count. Like, who created this? And then all of a sudden it could start a whole nother process, like not having a will to begin with, like what Adam had to deal with his father-in-law. So those little things, you want to do it well now and make sure it's really solid and you can be comfortable with it. So later your family isn't scrambling and wondering what they're supposed to do at that point.
Exactly.
If you have parents, aging parents, it's also a really good idea to sit down, learn about all the things that you need them to do in this book, because you don't want to be stuck with the mess yourself, and in that position of having to have fighting with siblings or other family members. And so whether you're using this book for yourself or you're using it for your parents, sort of for yourself too, we help guide you for all of these situations.
Abby, how many people would you say, like, as we've been talking about the book since it's come out, have brought up that topic, which is, okay, they're interested for themselves, but they're mainly interested in doing it for someone else, and that's what this is helping them do?
So many people. I mean, I can't name a number off the top of my head, but I would say it's probably 50-50. We have people who are reading this and using it for themselves. They have kids who depend on them, and they want to make sure that they're not leaving their kids a big mess or creating any fighting or anything like that. And then we've got people who have aging parents, or some people are both, and they're in what's called the sandwich generation. They have aging parents and kids that depend on them. And so we, no matter who you are, the mess is coming. So you just want to make sure to avoid it. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. How about now? Anne had asked about, her and her husband using it. And I guess, if a couple is married, is it something that is helpful for them to do together, or should they do it separately?
The way that it works best right now is that each person should create their own plan on Everplans. But if I read Anne's question, and if she said she did buy the book, so thank you, Anne. Can you and your husband both use it? If you mean, can you both get the free year, just write us an email or a note, and we will absolutely give you and your husband both a free year of the service. But each of you should create your own account on Everplans.
It seems like this is definitely something, looking at the comments, that it's a good vehicle for people to be able to maybe start that discussion with their parents. It is a hard discussion to have. I'm very fortunate. My parents were always very open about talking about it, but even with them being open and talking about it, some of what I learned, just like you did, was not what I would have expected. So it's good to have that conversation to make sure that what happens is what they choose. And one of the earlier comments was from someone who works in an ICU. And, obviously she has to deal with sometimes the challenges of people not having made clear their medical wishes. And, especially, I guess COVID might be a reason for some people to really, be able to have the discussion a little more easily than they had before. I'm not sure about that. You would probably know better whether you hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. And it certainly is. The whole world was hit by a bus in the form of this pandemic. And so we never know when things are going to happen. And it's just a good idea to share a few key pieces of information between people. And we really try to help people think all those things through.
Well, I know the copy of the book that I brought home to show is staying home with me. Because this is something that I know for myself I really need to do. And then it also helped me with my mom to figure out if there's anything that we've missed. I'm sure you could see in the comments there that people really found your talk very valuable and are looking forward to using the resources and reading the book. And I just thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us to talk about your book. And I'm sure you're going to hear from, or your organization will hear from, a number of us who want to also avail ourselves of the online resources. But
absolutely. We hope you do, and you should, because it's a great gift. We have the way for you to do all of this much more easily than you could on your own. So we hope you'll take us up on it and get the free year.
So, well, thank you all so very, very much. And best of luck to everybody. And again, here's the book. You can get it online from One More Page or any independent bookstore. And it will keep you busy for a while, but it looks very manageable. Just telling you, as someone who feels overwhelmed at times by these things. So thanks again, and have a great evening.
Thank you to One More Page.